When I was 12 years old, somebody high on drugs tried to abduct me off the street. A police officer found him and arrested him, but it's not what changed my life. What changed my life was later that night, that officer came to my house, not to take more notes, not to file more paperwork, but just to check on me. He looked me in the eyes. He told me that I was safe. He gave me his phone number. That moment stayed with me. It helped me in understanding what authority, security, and care were all about. It's why I eventually became a law enforcement officer myself and later a drug recognition expert. I believed for a long time that policing was about authority first and consequences second. I believed that rules kept people safe and that fear changed behavior. But experience has taught me otherwise. Not too long ago, an elementary school principal called me to the school to administer a drug test on a teacher. When I spoke to her face to face, it became quite clear that she was intoxicated, and not just a little. She was 3 times over the legal alcohol level. Administrators later checked her desk, and they found an empty box of White Claw. This wasn't her first time drinking at work. It was just the first time she'd been caught. What kept going through my mind, the questions I just couldn't comprehend was, how many people walked past her classroom and not notice the signs? How many 30-second conversations could have changed that moment for those kids? We often ask ourselves, how could this possibly happen? But in reality, I see this in my work every day. Part of the problem is that we've developed workplaces on zero tolerance policies that sound strong, but they leave people vulnerable. So we wait. We wait for the failed drug test, the car crash, or the crisis. And only then do we act. I remember having to understand these things. I remember a business owner who came to my office. He was a big guy, worked with iron and steel. He was almost in tears. You see, a couple days earlier, he told me it didn't matter to him what his employees did on their own time, as long as they didn't come to work impaired. Then, 2 of his employees, they came to work and they drove his company service truck straight through the back wall of his building. When he went to go and give them medical aid and then drug tested, they held up their medical marijuana cards, looked at it and said, "There's not a damn thing you can do about it." He looked at me and he asked, "Chuck, are they right?" I looked at him and I said, "Hell no," because legal doesn't mean safe, and policies don't mean that you're prepared. So, how do you prepare? Well, believe it or not, it's not early enforcement that makes the difference. It's people in the workplace that have been trained on what to look for and care enough to respond. I spent nearly 20 years in law enforcement. And when I retired, my wife and I started our drug recognition business and mobile drug testing. For 15 years, we test people in the workplace every single day. And what surprises me is when I make a positive identification, employers They don't get angry, they freeze. They know their policies, but they've not been taught on what to look for and how to approach it in a way that isn't confrontational. When I went about looking at all these different things, I had to understand why it was the way it was, how people could not see the things that I saw. When you are looking for impairment, it's not one of those things that's hard to do. It's one of those things that takes time. You're going to have to look at somebody. You're going to have to see the changes. You're not there to make diagnoses. And so that should take some of the pressure off. You're there to recognize early signs of impairment. Notice those things and have the courage to move forward and act. But you don't have to be an expert to be part of early recognition. You just need to do 3 things, and that's what I want to share with you now. The first is eye contact. Look somebody in the eyes. What do you see? Are their pupils dilated? Are they constricted? Are they able to look at you, or do they avoid eye contact altogether? The second thing is the ability to maintain a coherent conversation. When you talk to them, are they able to respond to the questions that you just asked? Or did they give you an answer where you're scratching your head going, did they hear what I said? The third thing is the ability to notice small changes in someone's normal baseline. And what I mean by that is balance there. Do they need something to steady themselves? Do they walk differently than you normally see? Is it something that causes you concern? Understand, you're not there to diagnose, so that should take some of the pressure off. But you are there to recognize early signs of impairment. And what matters most, and what most people miss, the most important thing, it isn't confrontation. It's empathy. I remember as a school resource officer more clearly this point. I spent more time solving problems in that school with a candy dish than I ever did with enforcement. Kids would come to my office guarded, expecting punishment, and I'd slide a Snickers bar across the desk and something would usually shift. I had one student tell me that she was stealing her mother's pain pills. Another told me he was selling marijuana to help pay for his sister's school supplies. Another told me that she was high every single day because it was the only way that she could cope with home. A lot of times, it wasn't what a student said to me. It was hidden in plain sight. I remember a student named David. He was caught in the restroom with a group of boys after they smoked marijuana, the typical smoking in the boys' room. When I contacted David, he was adamant that he hadn't done anything wrong. No way, Officer Marting, he said. Dude, you know me. There's no way. And that statement, it made a lot of sense. And most people would have probably just stopped right there. But marijuana impairment, it leaves subtle physical changes that are very easy to miss. Remember the three things I told you to look for. When I evaluated David and I looked at his eyes, his pupils were dilated. When I had him close his eyes, his eyelids tremored. And when I held a pen just a few inches away from David's face and I asked him to follow it, normally the eyes should come together. David's didn't. One of his eyes drifted outward. These are the things that people pass by every day not knowing, not because they don't care, but because they don't know what to look for. Look, David wasn't a bad kid. None of them were bad kids. They were hurting. So here's my ask. Try a 30-second check-in. Look someone in the eyes. Remember, the eyes are the window to the soul. Ask somebody how they're doing and actually wait for an answer. Notice changes. Trust your instincts. Move forward with confidence. Because early recognition, it's not about enforcement. It's about compassion, empathy, and care. Thank you.